Hey everybody, welcome back to the Managing with Mind and Heart podcast. Ethan here. So today I have a bit of a different episode to share with you. What I'm sharing with you here today is a snippet of a live workshop that I recorded with a group of leaders from a variety of different organizations several months ago. So these leaders, they attended our signature leadership development series online, and this series is called, Managing with Mind and Heart. Go figure. This online workshop series is something that we hold several times a year for any leaders from any place to sign up for. And so again, I'm going to share with you a snippet of this workshop today. And over the next several weeks and months, I'm going to continue to share more snippets of this workshop. So I hope you enjoy what you're listening to. And by the way, if you're maybe interested in signing up to attend our Managing with Mind and Heart workshop series online, would love to have you there. Go ahead and just go to our website, nashconsulting.com. And if you hover over the offerings tab, you'll see a button that says Managing with Mind and Heart Online Experience. This is always a fun time. We love holding these workshops online. Again, just leaders coming from all different walks of life, some brand new leaders, some that have been managers for many years, and they bring so much wisdom to the table, and it is always an awesome time. So hope you'll consider signing up and enjoy the episode today. Oh, and by the way, we've edited out any voices or comments from any of the participants in the workshop. So you'll just hear me talking. You're not going to hear any of the interaction or questions or group work that happens all throughout this workshop series. All right, enjoy. If you recall, we started our journey and almost finished our journey of what we call our management radar or our leadership radar. So we're talking about these 6 game changers to put on your radar before you come to work each day. So remember, you're coming to work, you're getting ready for work, you're thinking about the tasks that you have to get done that day, as you should. And my encouragement for you is to get these things on your radar each day, just to remind yourself, hey, if I can come into the day with this mindset, this might dramatically change the way I can show up as a manager and as a leader. And so just in brief here, I'll go through the 5 that we've covered. So to be an effective manager / leader, I have to have a growth mindset. So this relates back to that Johari's window piece, right? And that kind of blind spot box, as well as the hidden box, which is, I would say the punchline for me anyways on this is, hey, we don't know what we don't know about how we're showing up and how we're impacting those around us. And the more I progress in life, the more I realize how much I have going on in those boxes, right? And so just remember that this is an opportunity for you to take each of these concepts and try it on for yourself, right? Because we don't know what we don't know. And then have that mindset throughout each day in which you're engaging in your management practices. So number 2 is we spent a lot of time talking about morale and that it really matters. We won't go through the whole dance again with that, but just a reminder that, hey, morale is a really big deal. It leads to that thing that I think all of us would like to see from our teams, which is engagement, employee engagement. And you can't really get engagement without having morale in the first place. And engagement is going to lead to all those cool things you can't really pay people for, or you can't punish people for. Remember, you can pay me to come to work to do the basics, but it's my choice to volunteer my heart and my mind into the work, right? And I'm probably not going to do that in a low morale environment. And of course, the positive spin on that is when there's high morale, you really create the conditions for people to engage in the work. Number 3, great management involves demonstrating that I have my employees' best interests at heart. So do you all remember the psychological contract that we discussed? So in summary, it is, hey, the more you invest in me, the more willing and able I am to volunteer my heart and mind back into the work. In other words, the more you invest in me, the more I'm willing and able to invest back in you, the team, the organization, the work. And showing care and showing respect shows up as an investment in people. And so we talked about the top 15 management skills, with that one really being the only one that's in any rank order, to show people care and respect. Right. I've actually had a funny conversation with somebody several weeks back where he says, "Hey, these top 15 management skills, I'm doing really good. I think I have them all down, except for number one. That one I don't really have down." And I was a bit dubious about that claim of kind of, it's really hard to get the other ones down unless you first have that number one of showing care and respect to people. And that's just a basic human need, to be respected, to be cared about. Right? So keeping that mindset alive. And then, of course, as I alluded to, managing people involves a specific set of deliverables. So we talked about those top 15 management skills. I'm not going to go through all of them again, but just a reminder that that's the basis for everything that we're working on throughout this series. And then we finished with adaptive skills. So adaptive skills are the most important skills. They're closely related to emotional IQ, right? Emotional IQ is identifying what I am experiencing, identifying what other people may be feeling and experiencing, and then making good choices with that information. And adaptive skills are often those good choices we make, right? So again, IQ is the recognition of what's going on. Adaptive skills is what I put into practice based on that information. And we talked about a few adaptive skills, if you recall: receiving feedback non-defensively, giving feedback with clarity and kindness. And then we really worked on, of course, listening with care and respect, which quite frankly is not a skill that we all brought with us from childhood. And that's okay, because we can grow and improve in our adaptive skills. Let's talk about creating psychological safety. First off, this is a term that's fairly widespread at this point, at least in my world. So I think we're going to dig into this, of course, but there are what I find to be some misconceptions about what psychological safety is and what it isn't. So first off, what it isn't, it doesn't mean that everybody gets to be psychologically free of, hard feedback or hard conversations, right? It obviously doesn't mean everybody gets a ribbon for everything they do. It's not even a, safe space where we're going to be free from criticism or opinions or ideas that we don't like, or where I get to do whatever I want and there's no accountability for my actions and expectations. Doesn't even mean it's an environment where I'm free from being offended potentially. In fact, we find that in psychologically safe environments, there tends to be a fair amount of kind of hard and even heated conversations. So really what psychological safety is, it's where within a particular group of people, the collective focus is not on oneself, right? It's not on how do I look? How am I coming across? Am I okay? Right? Is it free for me to speak up? Right? Where's kind of my role in this group? It's an environment that's kind of collectively free of those type of worries, and where we're free to kind of focus on the task at hand, what we're trying to accomplish together. Now, the bottom line, folks, with psychological safety is that the reason we want psychological safety, and maybe this is obvious, is because it leads to higher performance. And I think here's the important piece, just more satisfying work environments at the end of the day. Because in a psychologically safe environment, people speak up. They share their thoughts. They talk about when they make mistakes. And all of this means we get a diversity of perspectives, which improves our decision-making, improves our learning, which improves our ultimate outcomes. I got to give you this, what I think is a cool example of this. So some of you might have heard of this before, but they've run these basically studies, these experiments, where they have teams of people engage in what I guess they would just call like the marshmallow spaghetti challenge. You've probably seen this before, probably even engaged in it before. I remember my first like couple days in college, we all had to do this challenge, and it was kind of an eye-rolling experience, but fun. So, anyways, I digress. The point being, they get a handful of uncooked spaghetti and a bag of marshmallows, and the idea is to build the largest tower in a certain amount of time without it collapsing. And so they have teams compete against each other. And they have teams of, in this particular experiment, teams of like MBA business students, teams of lawyers, teams of CEOs, so presumably pretty smart people, and teams of kindergartners. I guess I'll start with the punchline, which is that you might have guessed this. The team of kindergartners, on average, outperformed those teams of smarty pants adults. So when the researchers looked into this and was trying to figure out how could this be, they looked at the group of kindergartners, and the type of behaviors they were engaging in was much different than the adults, obviously. But what they would do is they would kind of huddle together, and they would have just these like quick bursts of energy, right? Just, oh, no, no, you go here. No, 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 that's not right. Actually, what about this idea? Actually, no, no, that's not going to work. You know what? You're taller than me. You do that. You're better at this. Actually, I might be better at this. Let me try it. And there's just kind of like this freedom in the way that they're interacting, right? And they looked at the group of adults and what the adults were engaging in. And by the way, these weren't necessarily groups of adults that already knew each other. But what they were engaging in is what psychologists call status management. And status management is essentially where we're thinking to ourselves, consciously or subconsciously, hey, where do I fit in with this group? Who's in charge here? What are the rules? Is it okay to disagree with people? Is it okay to dissent from the group? Is it okay to have a different opinion than everybody else? And so they're engaging in this status management. Now, the kindergartners, just because they're kindergartners, they haven't quite developed this radar for status management yet. Right? So they're just free to interact with each other. So the reason why I give this example is because this speaks to psychological safety. In psychologically safe environments, there tends to be low levels of that status management going on in general. It's not completely removed from everybody because we're still human beings and we're looking to be safe within a group and protect ourselves. But collectively, it's free of that status management. Where once again, we're free to focus on the task at hand with each other rather than ourselves. And how do I fit in and how am I coming across? I'm going to give you one more kind of example here just to come at this from another angle. When Amy Edmondson first started studying this construct of psychological safety, she did so within hospital settings. And essentially what she was doing, and I mean, it's pretty simple, is she would go look at the level, she would measure the level of psychological safety within a particular group, within a particular team, and then would also look at their performance. And her indicator for performance in this healthcare setting was the mistakes that were made, right? And so she got her data, she did all her research, and she was looking at the figures and charts, and she was like, awesome, this is exactly what I hope to see. It looks like there's a direct correlation between psychological safety and the number of mistakes. Oh, shoot. Then she looked at the data closer, and the graph was going in the wrong direction. It was actually demonstrating that higher psychological safety, the more amount of mistakes there were. And what do you think might have been going on there? Why would that be the story initially that the data was telling? Higher rates of self-reporting. That's exactly what she found. She went back and did some more research, and what she was actually finding is that there appeared to be more mistakes because people were reporting them more. They were talking about them more. And as she looked even closer, what she found was higher psychological safety, the less critical mistakes there were. right? In the hospital setting, I think is what she called it. As you would know, those folks in the hospital setting, less negative patient outcomes. Because of fear, people aren't going to be talking about mistakes like that. Absolutely. Right. So the more we can talk about the mistakes, we can intuit the less critical mistakes we're going to make down the road. So let's start with what might employees do and not do when feeling psychologically unsafe at work, and what might some of the results be? Creativity, innovation requires some level of risk because it has to become safe to fail. I'm not shy of using the word fail and failures, right? In fact, I like to use it a lot. I like to hold them up, like you said, and even say something like, "What failures did we have this week?"
Yeah.
Awesome learning opportunities. Like normalize that we want failures because that's how we learn. It can be taken to an extreme. So you as a leader also might not feel psychologically safe talking your mistakes and stuff like that. And it's kind of this weird catch-22 that we'll get into in a moment here, where as a leader, you kind of have to lead the way for that to be established, but you are also part of this group, right? And so you have to be able to navigate feeling psychologically unsafe while trying to build psychological safety at the same time. Yeah. There is both kind of a habit aspect to creating psychological safety, right? Behaviors we're going to engage in. And there's a systems aspect, right? Changing the systems and structures that can support those types of behaviors and habits. So I think that we probably have a pretty good understanding at this point of what it is, the things that we would see and not see. And so I'm going to go through this next section here. But this is where we put two different concepts together. So we're putting psychological safety combined with high expectations or standards or accountability, however you want to frame that. But psychological safety and accountability. All right. And so both matter is the punchline, obviously. And these two things, despite popular belief, are not at all mutually exclusive. They actually have to go together. And so I'll walk through this real quick. What might a culture in a team or workplace look like if standards/accountability are high, but psychological safety is low? This is what the research calls the anxiety zone. And that's probably pretty intuitive here. But this is kind of the box that can be a bit scary for people, right? Tons and tons of expectations, but no level of psychological safety to speak up, make mistakes, so on and so forth. And this is the box that tends to scare me the most, right? This is where we are in kind of fight, flight, and freeze at all times. Again, tons of accountability, but no psychological safety. You can't really have a culture of accountability with low psychological safety. We might think we have a true culture of accountability, but it's not the case. So, for example, accountability may be really high, but in this environment, that accountability tends to be unidirectional, right? It's the manager holding others accountable, but there tends to be no peer-to-peer accountability. And peer-to-peer accountability, folks, is the most powerful form of accountability. That's what a true culture of accountability is, when everybody is willing to hold each other accountable for high expectations. So without psychological safety, people are going to hide mistakes. They're not going to speak up about those mistakes. They're going to be less willing to speak up when things go off track. And so we protect ourselves in this environment, which tends to create less transparency, which creates less opportunity to actually have accountability conversations because stuff is being hidden and covered up. And by the way, why would I be willing to hold my peers accountable to high standards if I don't even feel safe talking about my own mistakes? So what would a culture look like if standards and accountability was low, but psychological safety was high? This is what they call the comfort zone, which sounds kind of nice, right? I'd appreciate a comfort zone. Note on this one, the comfort zone: high psychological safety, low performance standards. So we might have high psychological safety initially, but not for very long. So I've seen organizations with a management style that was really emphasizing psychological safety. But they think to do that, they have to do it to the exclusion of accountability and expectations. And they end up losing their psychological safety over time or never really achieving it in the first place because individual people's behaviors make it impossible to achieve. So the very thing they're shooting for, they miss because of a lack of accountability. Because with no accountability for standards, people start to lose trust with each other. We start to question each other's contributions and efforts. And no one is actually being held accountable for behaviors because we haven't created the framework around these expectations and what's acceptable here. And all of this is going to harm psychological safety over time. So again, I'm a broken record here, but I want this to be something that gets stuck in your head. You can't have a culture of psychological safety without accountability. All right, so this next box here, standards and accountability are low, and psychological safety is low. We can all probably agree that this is a no-no, right? We probably don't want to go here, right? So this is what they actually call the apathy zone. But this is where people show up physically, but not mentally. Their hearts and minds aren't focused on the work so much as on self-protection or just getting by. So this is an obvious one. Let's not shoot for that one, right? All right. Our final box here, high psychological safety and high performance standards. Now, of course, this is what we're shooting for, right? Again, we've seen organizations striving for one of these, pushing for one of them, but they aren't doing them together. Right? We need high accountability, but they forget about psychological safety. So accountability is low. We need psychological safety, right? But forget about accountability. So performance issues happen. So we need both together. All right, everybody. Well, hey, thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Managing with Mind and Heart podcast and listening to a little piece of our live recording of the Managing with Mind and Heart workshop. By the way, if you've ever wondered what some of our live virtual workshops are like, I hope you got a little bit of an idea for it here. Again, I encourage you to consider joining the thousands of other leaders that have participated in this workshop, and to do so, just go to our website, nashconsulting.com, and register for our next live series. All right, peace.